Good afternoon. I want to first thank the Chief of the Albany Police Department, Eric Hawkins, and acknowledge the FBI Safe Streets Task Force for their partnership today. I also want to thank the Mayor Kathy Sheenan, congratulate her on her reelection. Of course, my good friend State Senator Neil Breslin, Assemblymember John McDonnell, Common Council President Corey Ellis, the Albany County Deputy District Attorney Cheryl Fowler, and from my office, Chief Oliver Pufo, Deputy Chief John Reedy, and the Deputy Attorney General in charge of the office's Organized Crime Task Force, Nicole Keary. The violence in this city has reached breaking point. And last year, shootings that resulted in the injury of a person were up 110%. Between January and May of this year, there were at least 19 shootings and 9 homicides, 6 of which happened in May. And it's important to know that it's only up until the month of May, so it's 19 shootings and counting. As members of law enforcement, we all have a responsibility to crack down on violence and to protect the communities devastated in its wake. As someone who has been involved in public service for some time, I've attended my fair share of funerals as a result of gun violence in New York City and beyond. I've held countless number of mothers and fathers over open caskets. And so that's why today, all of us, we are here to announce the takedown of 2 major drug and firearms trafficking rings that have been operating in and around the capital region, and the indictment of 47 individuals for their roles in these operations. These 47 individuals are responsible for trafficking large amounts of heroin and cocaine and Oxycontin, and possessing firearms in this area, and have been linked to many of these violent and even fatal shootings that have plagued this community over the past year. Today's takedown was the result of a joint investigation between my office's Organized Crime Task Force, under the leadership of Nicole Keary, and the Albany Police Department and the FBI's Safe Streets Task Force. This year-long investigation, known as Operation Crosstown Quarantine, centered on 2 rival crosstown gangs in Albany and resulted in the seizure of nearly 1.2 kilograms of cocaine, 140 grams of heroin mixed with fentanyl and oxycodone, and $40,000 and 9 firearms, including 1 ghost gun. The various parts of these rings are broken up into 5 separate indictments. The first indictment includes 2 separate conspiracies. The first conspiracy centers around the Uptown Associates gang and the leader of this drug distribution network, Jamar Braybar. Mr. Braybar employed a vast network of individuals to sell his drugs, and had numerous reseller customers that brought heroin and cocaine from New York City to sell in and around the capital region, as well as New York and Orange counties, and even had resellers bringing drugs to Vermont. Mr. Brayboy was also relied upon Facebook to illegally sell his narcotics. The second conspiracy centers around the Downtown Associates gang and the leader of that drug distribution network, Tyshawn Morris, also known as Mac. Mr. Morris also employed a large network of sellers and resellers who primarily operated in Albany, in Fulton County, and Montgomery, Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady counties. The defendants and their co-conspirators were frequently heard on wiretap using coded and cryptic terminology in an attempt to disguise their illicit activities. In addition to the usual code names for drugs, Mr. Morris used common street terms for marijuana to refer to cocaine in an attempt to confuse law enforcement in the event that they were monitoring their activities. Mr. Morris is being charged as operating as a major trafficker, which carries a mandatory life sentence in state prison. In total, this first indictment charges 33 individuals with 501 counts in relation to their involvement in these two narcotic trafficking operations, including operating as a major trafficker, criminal sale, and criminal possession of a controlled substance, Class A, B, and C felonies, as well as conspiracy in the second degree, a Class B felony. During the course of the investigation, our investigators discovered that members of the Downtown Associates gang were using the social media platform Snapchat in order to traffic illegal prescription drugs, namely oxycodone. Snapchat, for those who are old like me, is a media platform, social media platform where users can share pictures and videos and messages that usually are only available for a very short time before they become inaccessible to their recipients, and which makes it an attractive platform for those participating in illegal activity. As outlined in the remaining indictments, Keon Kirkley, L. Shaquille Douglas, and Dayon Morris regularly sold illegal prescription medication over Snapchat by posting pictures and/or videos, which you can see printed out here, all of which pill bottles mark oxycodone with captions such as Boots and RP10s and RP20s and Green 15s, GWM, referring to prescription pills or Boots for sale, and GWM means get with me, and what milligram strengths were available, 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, etc. In addition to the sale of illegal prescription drugs over Snapchat, other members of the Downtown Associates used Snapchat to post videos and pictures of themselves holding handguns and rifles and machine guns, usually with high-capacity magazines protruding from the guns, which they and their fellow members use to carry their gang violence activities, carry out their gang violence activities. You can see from some of these images printed here, this specific group is known as the 50 Gang, and their name is a reference to the high-capacity magazines that they attach to their firearms, which allows them to hold up to 50 rounds of ammunition. We also seized a ghost gun for members of the 50 Gang, which is a type of gun that is incredibly dangerous because it has the same fatal power as traditional firearms, but it is unregistered, untraceable, and in many cases undetectable. And we have reached out to the Biden administration and to members of Congress to regulate these ghost guns. And our office, as you know, has been focused on, again, investigating ghost guns here in the state of New York. And during the course of the investigation, we also intercepted conversations and social media posts from members of the 50 Gang about how easy it was for them to purchase ghost guns, ghost gun parts, receive them in the mail, and then use them to convert otherwise non-working firearm pieces into very serious and lethal weapons through the mail, parts, and then convert them into dangerous firearms that can be used on the streets of Albany and all throughout the state. Members of the 50 Gang, who range from 18 to 28, are considered to be responsible for numerous drive-by shootings and homicides that have been plaguing the city of Albany over the past year, including the recent fatal shooting of an 18-year-old in downtown Albany. In total, the remaining indictments charge 14 people with 196 counts in relation to their involvement in narcotics trafficking and weapons possession, including enterprise corruption, which is a Class B felony, criminal sale and criminal possession of a controlled substance, which is a Class B felony, and criminal possession of a weapon, which is a Class C, D, and E felonies, which are. As I mentioned earlier, all 47 of these individuals were charged on 717 counts today in Albany County Court for their roles in these dangerous drug and firearms operations. You know, these communities have been terrorized and they've been devastated, and they've caused a lot of destruction and harm and injury and death. And so this is really a critical step in our efforts to combat violent crime and to hold accountable those who would cause that death and that destruction and that carnage here in Albany. When I took office 2.5 years ago, I made a commitment to focus on violent crime and to focus on those who are causing this destruction here in Albany and all throughout the state of New York. And so this, again, is just one step towards that effort. Again, I want to thank Albany Mayor Sheehan and Albany Police Chief Eric Hawkins for their partnership in this investigation and for their continued efforts to protect our communities. And none of this would have been possible without the tireless work of our organized crime task force in the Albany Police Department. And I want to thank Detective Bill Norris from the Albany Police Department, OCTF Detective Maria Romeo, Detective Supervisor John Monty, of course our Deputy Chief John Reedy, of course our Chief Oliver Pufo, the OCTF Assistant Deputy Attorney General and Senior Counsel Michael Sharp for his great work, a confidential assistant and legal support analyst Stephanie Pitts and Annalisa McPhee, OCTF Deputy Bureau Chief Maria Morin, and of course, all under the leadership and supervision of our Deputy Attorney General in charge of OCTF, who's doing an amazing job, Nicole Keary. The takedown was the result of a joint effort between my office and the Albany Police Department, and now I'd like to invite the Chief of the Albany Police Department, Eric Hawkins, to deliver some remarks. Detective?
Thank you, Attorney General. And I'd first like to thank Attorney General James for her leadership and her commitment to public safety. You know, make no mistake about it, this is a major, major step in us bringing calm and safety to some of our streets in our community. These were some dangerous individuals. I've said this many times before. We have a small group of individuals who are responsible for a large amount of the violent crime that we're seeing in our city. These 47 individuals were responsible, like the Attorney General said, for violence, destruction, and mayhem in our streets. And we're sending a strong message to not only those individuals, but their associates and anybody else who thinks or plans of any violent acts in this city, that there are consequences. There are consequences for this behavior that is causing so much harm and so much trauma to the people in our community. You know, these were dangerous weapons and these were drugs that are being taken off our streets. And I also want to thank our mayor, Mayor Sheehan, for her support for public safety and for making sure that this police department and other public safety entities within this city have the resources necessary in order to do what we need to do. Our detectives did a great job. Members of the community, step forward. You know, we can't do this. We've been saying all along that in order to address the violence that we've been seeing in our community, we must have partnerships and collaborations with members of our community, and they stepped up. So we thank them for what they've done. The AG's office was phenomenal. Albany Police Department detectives, the FBI Albany office was phenomenal in the resources and support that they offered. And none of this would have been possible either without the support from our Capital Region Crime Analysis Center that provided support, intelligence, and analysis, all vital to us investigating these incidents. And of course, the County District Attorney, David Soares, in his office, and the United States Marshal Service for all that they've done. This will send a message. It's going to send the message that we will not condone the sort of violence and destruction that we've seen in this community over the last couple of years. We're working very closely with members of the law enforcement community. We're working very closely with our elected officials. We're working very closely with the members of our community. We're taking these individuals off the streets, and we're putting in programs and practices to break this cycle of violence that we're seeing in our communities. And I thank everybody involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Now we'll hear from the Mayor of Albany, Mayor Kathy Sheehan. I want to congratulate her on her reelection. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You can tell she's a Democrat. It's only been the primary, but thank you. Look, we have said all along that we will focus on ensuring that our residents have the resources that they need to be successful, that we are doing all that we can to ensure that somebody who wants to be on the right path can be given the help, the assistance, the support, the workforce development, anything that they need in order to be successful in our city. But if someone chooses to use a gun, if someone chooses to engage in activity that brings danger to our streets, we will do everything in our power to find them, to arrest them, and to ask authorities like the District Attorney's Office and the Attorney General's Office to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. And that is what has happened. That is what our police department has been working on and doing incredibly successfully. And it's so gratifying to be here today with partners up and down from local to our county, to our state, to our federal level. Because the message needs to be very, very clear. We are all on the same page. We work together. We work with one another. We support one another because we care about this community. And I want to thank the Attorney General for demonstrating that yet again today. She cares about this community. She cares about every community across this state. And so when we reached out and said, we have to send a message, we need to have the full strength of law enforcement and every tool in the toolbox available to us, she said yes. And her team stepped up and did an amazing job. This is what we will do. This is what we will continue to do. So to those who are out there considering continuing to engage in this type of violence and mayhem, the message that I want to send is we will do everything that we can to find you, to arrest you, and to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. If you want to choose another path, we are here for you. We have resources that are available that probably you don't even know about. Take the time. Reach out to our violence interrupters. Reach out to our community-based organizations and find out just what is possible, because we are transforming lives. The people that you see here who were arrested, who were part of this sweep, they chose a path. But that doesn't have to be the only path. There is tremendous opportunity that is available out there. Our goal is to ensure that our residents are safe, that we keep people safe, and that everyone has the opportunity to achieve and fulfill what it is that they want for themselves and their families. And so this is, I hope, the last time we have to have this type of press conference, because we're ready. We're ready to ensure that we're doing all that we can to keep our community safe. But we are watching. This is what we meant. This is what we've been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And this is the culmination of what it looks like when we come together and demand
those resources. Two, in order for law enforcement to be effective, it requires the cooperation of the general public. And I implore the general public to reach out to my office, to law enforcement, the mayor's office, to cooperate with us so that we could, again, have some peace in the streets of Albany and all throughout the state of New York. Again, I do not want any innocent child or senior citizen or any individual to lose their life as a result of senseless gun violence in the streets of Albany. You have an obligation and a duty to cooperate with law enforcement. And then lastly, let me just say that we have been arresting these individuals throughout the morning and the day, getting these gang members off the street. And so I would urge you to surrender. It's just a matter of time before you are arrested. Please step forward and surrender. I'll now take on-topic questions.
Do you think there's any validity to the claims made by the members of the legislative minority from the state level that bail reform and other criminal justice reforms like raising the age have contributed to this problem?
No, I don't believe that, because if you look all throughout this country, in metropolitan cities, there's been an increase in gun violence. And again, I would argue that it's as a result of the easy access of guns. It is not only happening in New York, but it's happening all over this nation in states where they do not have bail reform, where they do not have discovery issues. And so this issue is really about easy access to guns. And so I'm urging Congress to pass responsible gun laws in this country. We need action. Doing nothing is unacceptable, and it's something that we cannot accept. And if you notice, and if you look at the data, and I follow the data, there has been a significant, and let me underscore the word significant, increase in the purchase of guns during the pandemic. And it's really critically important, again, that we stop and we end gun trafficking to the states of New York. 90% of the guns recovered in the state of New York come from states with lax gun laws. Lax gun laws. And so we cannot do this state by state by state. It requires a national approach, and I'm urging Congress to pass responsible gun laws. Next. Sure.
You know, sure, and we've always said that enforcement is only one part of the problem and one part of the solution. It has to be a multifaceted approach in order to address violence in communities across this country. We've got to take bad people off the street, but we also have to have social programs, recreation, all of these other support systems to break the cycle. I've said this many times before, that enforcement alone, if that's all we're doing, we're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. And so what's different today, and the mayor talked more about this, is that we're doing more than just taking these violent individuals off the streets. We have a whole support system now that we will be ourselves supporting in order to break this cycle, break the cycle of these young men and women who are getting involved in these things in the first place. Why do we have a 14 or 15-year-old who thinks it's okay to pick up a gun and shoot somebody else because of a conflict? You know, so we have to have systems in place to address those things. And so it's a multifaceted approach. We learned from what we did. I wasn't here when it happened, but I've seen it in other parts of the country. We've learned from what we did, and we know now that we have to have more than just enforcement.
I agree. I think that our infrastructure that we have in place to help support people who want to choose a different path is much stronger than it was in the past. We are giving people not jobs, but careers. We are creating opportunities. and the second chances that are available for people who are justice involved. We have evolved as a society. Our employers have evolved to recognize that providing second chances to somebody who may have been formerly justice involved not only benefits that individual, it benefits the community, can benefit that business. And so we have an infrastructure in place. We have wraparound services that are available. This has been part of what we have done. It's part of what GVI does and is funded to do, where we reach out and we send this strong message, do this, and you will go to jail. We will bring all of the power that we have available to us to ensure that you go to jail. But we don't want to do that. Right? If you need help finding housing, we will help you find housing. If you need help finding a job, we will help find you a job. If you want to get your CDL license, we will help you get your CDL license. What is it that you need in order to be successful? We all benefit from that. And that's where when you think about back at that time, we did not have violence interrupters, we did not have GVI, and we did not have the leadership that we have now in our Workforce Services Office, and a new view towards recognizing that workforce services has to include second chance services. And we've been doing that, person by person, job by job. So I think one of the things that this type of mass arrest does is it does send a shock, right? And so there are a lot of people out there who their pictures aren't up here yet. And the message that I want to send to them is, don't let them be up there ever. Don't make the choice that you want to fill a void, because if you do that and you fill that void, you're going to be on this poster next. There are options that are available. There are opportunities that are available. The Attorney General's office provides us with funding sources and programs that the Attorney General spoke about. It's not just the city, it's all of us. We want people to succeed. We don't want to do this over and over again. Doing this is way more expensive than training somebody to get their CDL license and getting them a job.
Let me just say this. Since I've been the Attorney General for the last 2.5 years, we've engaged in a number of gun buybacks all across the state. We have removed over 1,000 guns from the streets of the state of New York. As opposed to, again, taking the gun out of someone's hand and replacing it with some resources, we've replaced it with an iPad. We've replaced it with a job. We've replaced it with a referral for an apartment. If you take someone's gun out of their hand, you must replace it with something substantive. 2, we want to thank President Biden for his efforts yesterday, for resources, again, to prevent gun violence and firearm trafficking all across this country. We want to thank him again for providing resources to violence interrupters. As a former city council member in the city of New York, I was one of the first individuals to promote violence interrupters. They need more resources. But we need to also provide individuals, we need to address their felt needs: housing, jobs, mental illness, and the list goes on and on. I am so glad that Senate Majority Leader Schumer and House Speaker Pelosi agreed on an infrastructure bill, and I hope that Congress pass it, because we need to invest in individual infrastructure, not just bridges and roads. And if we do bridges and roads, individuals should be put to work on those bridges and roads. And so all of this and more is a means of prevention. And that's why we are here today. But, whoa. I support the legalization of cannabis. I've supported it for a long time because of the disproportionate impact that it has on communities of color. I oppose the war on drugs because it has had a disproportionate impact on communities of color. These individuals who have engaged in mayhem and destruction and death, individuals need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and they should be removed from the streets of from the city of Albany. I don't believe it's a gateway drug. Next question. So we're still engaging in investigation with respect to the tracing of these guns. So I have nothing more to say other than that the investigation continues with respect to tracing. We're looking into the tracing of guns, and hopefully when an ATF leader is appointed by Congress, hopefully we'll be working with ATF to further those investigations. Yes. So as you know, there is a federal prohibition against any state attorney general from bringing action against a gun manufacturer or distributor. We have reached out to Congress to remove that restriction so that we can hold individuals responsible, again, for the sale of guns to individuals where manufacturers and distributors engage in reckless sales or they do not abide by the law of the state of New York and by the state of New York. No, there's no information, unfortunately. Again, there are so many restrictions, federal restrictions on our ability to trace guns. There's federal restrictions on our ability to bring actions against gun manufacturers and distributors. As you know, a recent bill that was passed in the state legislature recently is being challenged. And so we look forward again to some means and ways to hold individuals accountable for selling these products of destruction and death. There was a recent report that indicated that 90% of the guns recovered come from states with lax gun laws. That has been reported over and over again. It's a yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, we're going to do off-topic questions, so I know you're waiting. Our investigation is ongoing, and so it's just not limited to these individuals. We will continue. There's an ongoing effort, again, to focus on firearm trafficking and for individuals who engage in illegal behavior in the state of New York. It was mainly in the capital region.
Yes. I don't have that information right now to tie in exactly what the relationship was, but the important thing here is that all of these individuals who we have here were involved deeply with the drug trade. And we suspect, and we know in most of the cases, that they were involved in the violence and the destruction and mayhem that we've seen in our streets. Typically what we see in situations like this, the short answer to your question is I don't have the exact numbers, but typically what we see in situations like this is that a very small percentage of people in any population in a community, especially in our urban centers, are responsible for a very large percentage of the violence that we're seeing. And that's one of the reasons why we have initiatives like GVI and others to help us to identify that small group. And moreover, what we found is that when you address that very small group of individuals, it tends to have an impact in driving down the violence and enhancing quality of life in our community. And so while I don't have the numbers, I'm very confident that by taking these individuals off the street, we're going to see a significant difference in terms of the safety and the security and the perception of safety that we have in our community.
As we just heard, there are reintegration services already in the city of Albany, and there are services or purchase services, and I will be
I don't know if we can necessarily answer that question. The reality is that these are individuals who have caused destruction and death on the streets of Albany, and we will go after those individuals individuals regardless of their race, ethnicity, or geography. It's important that, again, we hold individuals accountable for their behavior, regardless of race. Let me also say that, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these, the Office of Attorney General, we are not in a position to go after manufacturers and distributors of guns who violate the law, who engage in negligent behavior. I recognize and support the Second Amendment, but at the same time, when manufacturers and distributors do not engage in background checks, do not follow the law, it's important that they too be held accountable for the destruction caused. And I would hope that the United States Congress repeals that law so that it can allow the Office of Attorney General and any other Attorney General in this nation to take action against negligent manufacturers and distributors of products of death. I will now take off-topic questions. Oh, you still? Okay. Okay, so do you still have on-topic questions? On-topic. Yeah.
At the time of this press conference, we had somewhere between 25 and 30 who were actually taken into custody. The remaining, we have a very good idea of where they are. This press conference will give notice. And so, like the Attorney General insisted and encouraged, we're further encouraging those who know that they're wanted to turn themselves in. I'm not prepared to say whether or not these individuals are involved in that particular one. That case, though, we're making progress. I've got to be very careful in the type of information I publicly give out regarding the case because my detectives are making a lot of progress and I don't want to impact their investigations. But I anticipate that we'll be able to have some good news with that one.
We have that number. If we do, we'll give it to you off record. Off topic. Yes. I did get a progress report and I cannot give you a date on when it will be concluded. I cannot give you a date on when it is concluded. It will conclude when it concludes. Next. Again, make a statement with respect to our investigation. I can tell you with respect to the NYPD that litigation is still ongoing. As you know, NYPD has engaged in some corrective action. And just recently, they are including in it training de-escalation, which is one of the issues that we focused on. It is important that they take advantage of time and space with respect to any interaction with any individual and that they adhere to and follow the Constitution of the State of New York